Looks like Ali Saidi is there.
Yes.
See him. See if I can see other participants.
Hello, I'm Lamia.
Ah, Lamia. All right.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, you guys. All right.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. And can you see me?
Uh-huh.
Perfect.
There is Shu Yin Zhang. All right.
Hello, hi.
Hi. You don't see there. Now I can see you. All right. We got everybody. So anyway, I'm probably going to butcher some names here. Make sure I get them right. So I have it written here. I've heard your name, Shu Yin Zhang or Zhang Shu Yin. Which one is it?
Zhang is my surname. Shuyin is my first name.
Oh, okay. So Shu Yin Zhang. Okay, they got it backwards here. All right. And Ali Saidi, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Oh, good. All right. I wanted to make sure. I just spoke to one of your fellow students there. Do you know Devin?
Oh yeah, he's my
I just had a conversation with him on the phone the other night, and he mentioned you. All right.
He did.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's see, and then Lamia Filali Munsef.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. So anyway, I got your bios here. I got the name of your papers. I think I got everything I need.
Awesome.
Can we try to share our screens to see if the PowerPoint is working?
I think the tech person is going to control when you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. As far as I understand, all I have to do here is introduce you guys and get the session rolling. I guess they ran a little over in the keynote. So as usual, things are probably going to be exactly on time here to start.
That's good.
Yeah, that shows the paper was interesting. Anyway.
Oh, really?
Well, people have questions, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So is Devin gonna be here or not?
I don't know if he's gonna make it. Or I know he's spreading himself pretty thin these days.
Oh yeah, he's busy.
He's trying to finish his dissertation. He started a professor job already, and he's publishing, and he's trying to start a translation program.
True.
He's got a lot on the table there.
True, that's true.
Yeah. I'm excited for him though. It sounds great.
Yeah. By the way, he also mentions you a lot.
Yeah.
You're his favorite professor, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I enjoyed having him here. He was a great student. We miss him.
Yeah, I miss him too. Now he's in Utah.
Yeah, now he's gone back there. So I guess he just goes back to finish. He's just going to go back to finish up the defense of his dissertation, and then he's done.
True. Yeah, soon.
Yeah. And did it in record time, I guess.
Yeah, that's 2 years and a half or so. I wish I can do that.
I certainly couldn't when I did mine.
That's relieving.
All right. So let's see here. See if we can get. I don't know if let's see if you guys are unlucky in that you've happened to have gotten the least tech savvy person in this entire university as the chair of your session. So there might be a couple. I asked you to be patient with me. I am not particularly good at this. So, John, are you gonna be able to control them when they can share their screens?
Yes, I think they can, and maybe we can let them take turns to try it. I think right now you have the access to share the screen. Maybe we'll just follow the order of this session, and the first one will be Shu Yin.
Okay, let's see.
You want to try to share your screen?
Yes, just let me do this.
Let's see here. Choose options to view. For some reason, I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
Is it okay?
I don't see anything.
Let
me see.
Here. That's my screen. What am I doing here?
So you are sharing your screen right now?
Yes.
And you can see the screen on your side?
Yeah, because
I think so. I can see my screen.
I think on top of the screen there is the option to see. It says two options, and then you have to choose her name. Shared screens, and then there is Yao and Shuyin. So you choose her name, and I think I can see her screen now.
So can anyone see my screen?
I can.
And
Okay,
for some
that's
reason,
good.
I can't see it.
Yeah, but you have to
neither.
choose her. You have to choose her screen. So on top of the screen,
Oh,
there is this green thing.
so
and then
maybe,
two
Okay.
options.
yeah, so let me stop the other sharing so that we can all see Shu Ying's. So maybe now, yeah,
There
it's
we
coming
go.
up. Cool, I
Yes.
figured it out.
There
Is
it
it okay
is.
now? So everyone can
Yes.
see my screen now, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I just stop it and maybe the next one.
Do you have any audio-visual things to play with?
No.
The screen? Okay,
No.
cool. Just the slides.
Yeah, okay,
Perfect.
so I'm gonna stop it.
Okay. And then maybe Ali, if you are ready, you can try to share your screen.
So I just click on this one and then which one should I share?
I have to do this.
So maybe if I share this one. And
there we go. I see something.
We can see your screen. Yeah, the slides are coming up.
This one? The ugliest slide.
Oh, it's great.
It's not. Yeah, it looks good.
Right.
It's beautiful because we can see it. All right.
Okay. And I have to go back now.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, do you have any videos or like audios to share?
No, it's just
okay.
the screen.
Then it's good. Yeah, you can just click the play the slides button on the bottom, and we will see the full screen of it.
Okay, we'll do that. But then how can I unshare it?
You can just stop share. Yep, there you go.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right. And
Yeah.
then
All
Lonnie.
right. So yeah, I'll try. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Perfect.
And now, no. How can I unshare it here? No.
There is a small stop sharing.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
Sorry.
Great. So I think we are now ready. And Jiayu or Tyler, if you can share the intro slide back, that would be great if you are there. Yeah, they have the intro slides. Okay. So if everyone's ready, I think we can let the attendees to come in the room.
Okay. Do I do that or do you do that?
We can. I think you can. Yeah, I can do that. You can just focus
great.
on small talks, warm up.
All right. So let me know when I can start introducing and then we can get going.
Cool.
You let them in?
Yeah, I let them in and it's tackling the time, but I think we can give them a couple of more minutes. And when you feel ready, you can start. Yep.
All right. Well, anyway, I'm excited about this session because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I think all the research I ever did was kind of based on the idea that theory and practice weren't firmly grounded in one another. And I kind of, that's what motivated me to want to write my dissertation about healthcare interpreting. Because the stuff I was reading in the literature and what I was witnessing every day when I went to work as an interpreter just didn't match up. And I feel a lot of hope reading the titles of your papers because your papers all seem to address this kind of disconnect, which is good. I think we need more of that. And it seems like all of you have got actual practice in the field, which is great too. So it's not just theory, it's practice as well. So anyway, let me get started by introducing people. And so our first presenter is going to be Shuyin Zhang, and she's a lecturer in translation studies in the School of Humanities and Social Science at the Chinese University of Hong Kong in Shenzhen, where she teaches culture and translation. She does research and translation practice and translation project management at postgraduate and undergraduate levels. And she has a PhD in translation studies and an MA in linguistics from University College London. And her research interests focus on machine translation of Chinese fantasy literature, metaphor and classical Chinese literature translation, and translation in paratext. And her paper is To Bridge the Gap Between Ivory Tower and Industry, a case study exploring the school enterprise cooperation and translator training. So let's get her to share her screen and we can get started.
Okay, so let me just do this. Can you see my screen? Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Zhang Shuying from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share my thoughts on the cooperation between school and enterprise in translator training in Chinese higher education. In today's presentation, I would like to draw your attention to the gap between translator training programs and language services industry first. After reviewing key studies in the field, I aim to propose a collaborative teaching approach between these two parties. A case study of the course Translation and Project Management I taught last year will be used to showcase the implementation of this approach. Finally, I will talk about the feedback I received from my students. So, in the age of Industry 4.0 and today's more interconnected world, the innovation of computer technology and globalization of business changed the mode, process, and working environment of translation fundamentally and increased the complexity of translation tasks. As a result, the global language services market has developed tremendously over the past few years. It now urgently needs talents, especially of a relatively new profession, translation project manager, who plays a crucial role in the life cycle of a translation project. However, in China, not many MPI programs offer the course of translation and project management, and most are taught by instructors without any industry experience. A gap exists between the translator training and the current needs of the language service industry. In fact, the gap between these two worlds, the ivory tower and the translation industry, persists as a global phenomenon. The translator training is based mainly on traditional classroom learning. Most translator training programs still linger on teacher-centered education. Immediate task of text transfer from one language to another and repetition rather than the process. While the language service industries actually expect more graduates who are familiar with computer-assisted translation tools and equipped with more project management skills, the lack of communication and exchanging ideas between these two parties is a primary cause of this gap. Another is the relatively few studies link translation training with the language service industry. Both aggravate the difficulties for teachers to prepare graduates for the job market. So this paper actually proposes a collaborative pedagogy in translator training by reporting the implementation of this collaborative approach in the course Translation and Project Management offered at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen. The curriculum design, including the course description, teaching methodology, teaching plan, learning outcomes, and assessment are reviewed. Although the present paper focuses on cooperation between schools and enterprises in my programs in Shenzhen, it is hoped that it can also invite discussions on similar courses in other regional areas. Project management is not an entirely new topic in the field of translation studies, but a young subject that has been relatively underrated and overlooked. Since the 2000s, scholars have been attempting to locate the role of project management in translation industry, transferring project management skills and knowledge to translation studies. The early research primarily discusses the different stages of a project and reports on the management of specialized translation projects, such as scientific and technical translation, as well as terminology translation. Within the existing body of research of translation and project management, much attention has been drawn to the profession of a translation project manager. Most papers highlight a particular set of skills or the overall competence that a translation project manager is expected to acquire. For example, Plaza Lara suggests that overall competence of a translation project manager should include knowledge of translation subcompetence, strategic subcompetence, and instrumental subcompetence. Apart from identifying the competence and skills necessary for the profession, teaching translation and project management is another recurring research theme. Some scholars suggest a teaching method simulating translation company environment. Others discuss the importance of a collaborative teaching. Regarding the translator training and collaborative teaching methodology in China, one of the most important studies is from Cai and Zhang. They summarize the different school and enterprise collaboration in MTI programs. And Wang and Cui also briefly discussed the school and enterprise collaboration in training translation project managers in general. Cui mentions that in order to alleviate tutors' lack of experience of managing localization projects, universities can invite project managers to lecture on selected topics, and tutors are encouraged to engage in self-learning and participate in actual translation projects. These studies lay the groundwork for teaching and research of translation and project management in China. However, they do not elaborate on how this collaboration actually works. Apparently, a series of questions will need to be answered. For example, what role does the enterprise play in such a collaboration? And what is the role of the teacher? And what is the feedback from the students? A case study reporting on the actual implementation of collaborative teaching may shed some light on these questions. Therefore, the present paper reports the graduate level course Translation and Project Management taught in the academic year 2020 to 2021 at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen. The city Shenzhen is home to a large number of local enterprises with global competitiveness, such as Huawei, Ping An, China Merchants Group, Tencent, and DJI, and is ranked first in the countries in terms of the number of commercial entities and entrepreneurship density. The geographic advantage allows my programs to establish cooperation with enterprises more easily. My course aims to develop a sense of knowledge in translation project management and a wide range of skills that can be applied to various situations in the language service industry. It creates a collaborative teaching environment between schools and enterprises to allow students to get insights into the industry. The class meets 3 hours per week during the 14-week semester, and the class size is controlled. In total, there are 15 students divided into 3 groups. Each runs as a small translation company under my supervision and the co-instructor's supervision. Students take turns to play different roles as project manager, editor, translator, etc., and swap roles in different projects. So let's take a look of my teaching plan. The course is divided into 3 modules, each lasting about 3 to 5 weeks. The first module introduces the course and project management in general. The lectures within this module are more theoretical based, introducing the project management knowledge areas and the different stages of a translation project. Considering it is the beginning of the term, I think it is a good time to establish relationships with students. So I do not involve more than one other instructors in these lectures. However, during the tutorials, I do invite a co-founder of a local startup technology company called Node Studio to talk about the electronic markets in Shenzhen and the translation services that an electronic product needs. The second module is focusing on translation projects and services in different market sectors. This module invites project managers and other key roles such as editor, copywriter that one can expect in a translation projects. They come from leading companies in the field, including Shanghai Translation Publishing House, NetEase Interactive Entertainment Limited, and China's largest fan-sub group, Renren, YYETS. Also, a senior freelance interpreter is invited to talk about managing the interpreting services for a conference. So these lectures are divided into 2 sessions. I am teaching the first sessions to warm up the class and briefly introduce the prerequisite knowledge to ensure the better teaching effect. In the second half, each of the guest speakers will introduce one translation project they participated. The third module is more specialized, and it is where Huawei Translation Service Center is involved. This module includes a 4-week condensed teaching and a 1-day on-site visit. The topics covered include transcreation skills in technical translation, quality management, translation management tools, and patent translation. Because these lectures are more technology-based, I will be mainly assistant to the co-instructors who are the experts in the field. So during this collaboration, apart from designing the course syllabus, I am mainly responsible for giving introductory lectures, designing and marking coursework, evaluating students' overall performance, and more importantly, coordinating with co-instructors to give lectures online and offline. Just to ensure the smooth delivery of the lectures, in a way, I think I am more like the project manager of the course. On the other hand, the co-instructors from Huawei are in charge of the technical training, and the co-instructors from other companies are in charge of the introduction to the management of translation projects in different industries. They also supervise students' group projects, contributing to the assessment as well. So let's take a look at the learning outcomes and the assessment scheme. Upon completing the course, students are expected to gain knowledge of professional language services, including their work procedures and requirements, translate specialized text with the assistance of suitable resources and technology, manage translation projects according to the purpose and nature of the projects, as well as the client's needs, and develop IT skills for text processing, communication skills, and professional ethics for a career as a project manager in the language service industry. And as you can see, the most important component in the assessment scheme is group projects. This is due to the nature of the course. So to give you a brief idea on what the coursework will be like, part of the group assignment is presented here. In this assignment, students are asked to provide website localization service for Nord Studio, the local startup company mainly selling earphones. Project closure report is required as well. This is the part of a group, one group's project closure report. And in terms of the feedback I received from students and the course reviewers, they are actually very positive. Examiners' comments on the assessment being reasonably designed in accordance with the learning outcomes, and the workload and the level of difficulties are appropriate. And according to the course teaching evaluation from students, the overall satisfaction of the course is 5.85 out of 6. The most attractive part is the module 2, where the guest speakers from different industries are invited. They also like the group assignment for the local company, Nord Studio. But much to my surprise, the unsatisfying part is the lectures taught by Huawei. They think it is too difficult. However, in the pre-enrollment questionnaires, students demonstrate a strong interest in this part. I think I need to redesign this bit in the future. So to conclude, the co-teaching in this course is successful, judging from the feedback from students and the external reviewer examining the course. However, the syllabus still needs adjustments. In summary, the present studies offer novel insights in the following aspects: the curricula designed to cover multifaceted translation services, redefine learning outcomes for graduates to enter the industry in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Bay area smoothly, implementation plan of co-teaching activities, feedbacks from students regarding this collaborative teaching methodology. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions from you in the Q&A session. So thank you for your attention.
All right, are there any questions? You can unmute yourselves, I believe. I think I said that.
Yes, I have a question for you, Shuyin. I wonder, you mentioned in the feedback part, I have two questions. So the first is being the feedback of students saying that the lecture taught by Huawei were too difficult. I wonder if you can elaborate more on that. And also you mentioned you have some plans, to readjust that part. Do you have some ideas about what you want to do later? And the second question is, because I also teach this kind of courses, I've been trying to experiment a lot this semester for my students, including more guest speakers. And I wonder, what do you think about the timing to bring in the guest speaker? Sometimes I feel maybe in the end it will be better since now they have all the dots they need. They want to connect them. But sometimes I feel like at the beginning they may want to have like an overview to know more about the industry, to know like a simplified overview or something from the guest speaker. So I'm very curious to know your thoughts. And by the way, very, very interesting research study, very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So to the first question, they think because Huawei, they have their own system, their own project management system, and their own translation tools, which is quite different from the ones we are using. So actually, it's this very, I don't know, kind of designed only for Huawei. So it is not easy for the students to learn these tools within such a short time, the 4 lectures. I think that's why they say it is too difficult. And also your second question is when to bring in the guest speakers, right?
Yes, so my second question is about, when would be a good time, the good timing to bring the guest speaker in a way that best benefit the student.
I think I normally divided my class into 2 sessions. I will talk about the basic project management knowledge in the first session, depending on the nature of the project. And then in the second half, usually it's 1.5 hours, I will invite the project manager or the copywriter or my guest lecturers to talk about to share their experience of the one particular projects they involved in. For example, a video game and or a film, and also there will be like about 30 minutes time for the Q&A session, so students can ask questions they really want to know about the industry to the guest lectures. So the second half, it's my plan. And also I forgot to answer one of your first questions. My plan to readjust the Huawei part is that because this is the only part I didn't involve in the teaching. I think if I can teach a little bit of the normal translation management tools or the usual the normal softwares one can expect in the translation industry will be good, and then the Huawei experts can talk about their own softwares and their own systems. So I think the students think it is too difficult because I didn't involve. That's my guess. And next year I will also talk about like 30 minutes or 1 hour before the guest lectures of the Huawei company step in. So I will do the introduction part as what I do in module 2. So that's my plan.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely agree with you that sometimes there are a lot of trials and errors, and also it's definitely highly depending on the students, right? Sometimes the students, they already have some knowledge about certain tools or softwares, which takes much less time, but sometimes we need to warm up for them a little bit longer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any more questions there? I have a little question for you. One of the things that I realized in my practice is managing projects is that they tended to get bogged down between the translator and the editors where they start arguing about minutia. Just, they don't agree with the corrections that have been made. And this whole process would get bogged down. And I wonder if you ever address these kind of issues about learning to have more of a thick skin as a translator and accepting editing from other people, or that's not an issue you found to be of interest to you.
You mean accepting the corrections from the editors, or?
Yeah, because it seems like the projects that I was managing got bogged down in that phase where the translator would start arguing minutia with these people about, no, that's the word I use, or what, you know, I mean, it seemed to me like, who cares? But it was getting things bogged down where I had a lot of paper I had to move through the office, and it would get stuck because they were very beholden to the decisions they made in their first draft of their translation or whatever, you know.
Well, because I haven't thought about this in my course, because the course I taught mainly focused on the stages of the translation projects. So it's actually the overall process instead of the actual translation. So luckily, my students didn't argue about who has to accept whose corrections, and just the overall process of the translation project. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Any more questions out there? If not, maybe we can move along.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, all right, thank you for your paper. All right, so next up, we have Ali Saedi. He is a researcher of the language industry and language service provider himself. He graduated from Al Mustansiriya University in 2010 with a BA in translation, followed by an MA in Arabic translation from Kent State University in 2017. He is currently a PhD candidate in translation studies at Kent State University. His academic research focuses on the language service providers section of the language industry. And his professional, he's got professional experience now for over 11 years as a service provider. So let me also read the Cloudless paper here. And his paper is going to be Reference Translation Competence Model of the Middle East and North Africa's Language Service Provider Segment, Aligning Expectations and Requirements. So if you could share your screen.
All right.
We can get going.
Okay.
Yeah, click the button here.
Okay. You can see that?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rosenberg, for the introduction. And greetings, everyone. Thank you for attending this session. I will present about my in-progress research on language service providers in the Middle East and North Africa region, also known as the Arab world, and how I plan to utilize competencies from existing translation competence models and try to identify a more updated reference of a model if possible. But let me first put together these long noun phrases into acronyms for purposes of simplicity. So I'll be referring to the Reference Translation Competence Model as RTCM, and the Middle East and North Africa region as the MENA, and the language service providers as LSPs. And I hope that these acronyms wouldn't rather create confusion. As for aligning expectations and requirements, I'll operationalize these two terms for you in a minute. But first, let me put you through the bigger picture on the project, which is this research is taking place. So normally researchers and designers of translator training curricula try to keep their courses updated and up to date with the ever-changing language industry. They strive to echo the market needs and expectations, but how do they do so? They basically collect the language industry's requirements, most likely profiles and professional goals of jobs and careers, also known as job ad descriptions, and utilize these outputs as inputs for their curriculum design. Then they create and update competencies to be used as objectives and learning outputs to inform the design of learning models, strategies, objectives, assignments, and so on. Of course, the literature on competence in translation studies goes beyond the scope of translator training and include, for instance, the dimensions of the translation process and cognitive effort, translation as product, translation quality assessment, and so on. Nevertheless, they all pour in the same vessel of improving curricula. So the patterns for creating competencies from which the curriculum design draws to address the market needs and expectation is heavily reliant on the industry-determined requirements. Those requirements, of course, are presented in job ads most likely. But wait a second, why the industry-determined requirements are unquestionably trusted? And also, do these requirements provide enough basis for defining market real needs and expectations? So I'm saying we need a better understanding of the dynamics of the language industry to be able to have a full-fledged conceptualization of translator training objectives. So what am I proposing to achieve this? I propose that we take a step back and study the language industry's outputs in more depth. Here comes the two terms, requirements and expectations. By requirements, I mean the hiring requirements. So profiles and professional goals of jobs and careers taken from descriptions of skills, responsibilities and duties, qualifications and experience, etc. And this is, of course, presented in job advertisement and requirement from candidates in order to perform specific translation services. These are the sources of information translator training usually utilizes. But I suggest that we should validate these requirements first by aligning them with expectations. And by expectations here, I mean the services these LSPs offer, the promises they make, the procedures they follow, the goals they strive to achieve, the policies they foster, etc. And this can be observed on their websites and online presence, I mean the LSPs. Of course, the taken assumption that there will be sufficient alignment between requirements and expectations is a given. Otherwise, the language industry wouldn't have continued to thrive. But this step, or step back, if you may call it, can serve as cross-verification of an untested assumption that requirements are representative of real markets objectives. Also, by possibly finding even fine-grained discrepancies between requirements and expectations, one might make observation and draw cautious conclusions on how to optimize the translator training curriculum and also the language industry and foster competencies. So how am I doing this? Here, I just want to mention that a small-scale study was conducted on 2 LSPs to measure the feasibility of such methodology for possible expansion to conduct a larger data collection and analysis. So the study here, or the case study, utilizes 2 sets of data. First is the data set that consists a corpus of expectations collected from the websites of 2 active Arab LSPs in the different Arab countries, mainly focusing on services. Some corpus study methods are adopted to collect and analyze the data, like keywords, tokenization, stemming, lemmatization, tagging, and other prompts. The corpus is analyzed by generating a word list that displays keyword frequencies. A manual search is performed looking up for the most frequent words or word phrases that possibly correspond to services. The results, as you can see here, show the frequency of occurrence of given services, like translation and interpretation, which allows to understand the types of services offered in the MENA region. Those keywords are at that point processed as concordances in order to check their context of use, and this helps to understand the nature and categories of services the MENA LSPs offer based on reading the descriptions of these services. The second set of data consists of a corpus that includes translation-related job descriptions, which is the hiring requirement corpus, corresponding to the services that are extracted from the first data set, the services expectations corpus. These job descriptions are taken from job advertisements of posts matching the services under investigation. For example, for a localization service, job descriptions are taken from job ads of localizer, localization expert, and the like. These job descriptions are retrieved from the LSP websites. And these job descriptions are analyzed using the same analysis process for the services, the expectations corpus. The requirements corpus is subsequently analyzed and keywords processed as concordances in order to check their context of use, looking for constituents of job requirements, like the duties, tasks, experiences, skills, etc. The results shows the frequency of occurrence of given skills, experiences, tasks, or duties, allowing the researcher to draw up a list of the MENA's LSP segment proposed requirements for the services under study. The descriptions of these jobs represents what the industry looks for in a performer of such service. And now to compare the services expectations to hiring requirements to observe and document patterns of alignment and misalignments between them, we need the data to be in comparable format. Here comes the role of our reference translation competence model, or RTCM. The proposed method to make the two data sets of the two corpora comparable is to transform the descriptions of services, in other words, the expectations, and the descriptions of hiring requirements into categories of competencies by compiling up-to-date translation competencies from the different existing translation competence models available and matching the different expectations, promises, and needs found in service descriptions with the skills and duties, experiences, and qualifications found in requirements descriptions, and coming up with these competencies. At this point, the alignment of competencies can take place to identify the levels of conformation and discrepancies between expectations and requirements. The results of such process could also help define and update competencies and structure an RTCM that can be incorporated in translator training curriculum design. Here is some of the competence models from which competencies are leveraged for the purpose of this study. For instance, the process of acquisition of Translation Competence and Evaluation Group, or PACTE, developed a competence model after a longitudinal study that started in 1997, which includes 6 core competencies: bilingual, extra-linguistic, instrumental, strategic, psychophysiological, and knowledge of about the translation. While the European Masters in Translation, or EMT, developed a translation competence model that addresses translation services offered in Europe, an EMT competence model includes also 6 core competencies. These are translation, service provision, language, intercultural, information mining, and thematic and technological. Although I don't have time to talk about every competence in this presentation, I would like to draw attention that although many of these competencies from the different models are similar in operation, and some even have the same names, but there are some nuances between them. Now let's take one example to demonstrate how this investigation runs. And I am taking the interpretation service here as an example. Examining the interpretation service descriptions or expectations presented in the two LSP's websites, frequent words and word phrases that can be observed in context are along the lines of cultural implication and idiomatic expressions in the two languages of command, like culture savvy, convey idioms, etc. Going back to the compilation of competencies and their definitions, Kelly's cultural and intercultural competence seems the most applicable to this part of the descriptions. On the other hand, the requirements descriptions in the ads of interpretation seems to have a frequent mentioning of knowledge of the target culture dynamics, like knowledgeable in target culture, proficient in target culture, etc. Referring to our competence, Nord's cultural competence seems more viable since it focuses more on the target culture. Here we can refer to a discrepancy in requirements where the descriptions should better reflect the need for a mastery of the source and target cultures alike, as the expectations state. Nothing should be taken for granted, and descriptions need to be clear and inclusive of all requirements. This is just a quick example of part of the interpretation service alignment and analysis process. The descriptions of expectations and requirements show many discrepancies on all levels, whether it's duties, responsibilities, promises, etc. So it goes without saying that when carrying out the study on a larger scale, it is expected to see patterns of relatively similar expectations and requirements, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Since each two subcorpora of the same service addresses the same topic, being this service, of course, for instance, the interpretation example. Nonetheless, as the small-scale study showed, we expect that the findings will indicate a margin of misalignment between expectations and requirements. We expect to find insufficient descriptions of skills in job descriptions to address all required competencies of certain services. We will operate on these discrepancies to augment the proposed RTCM. Retrieving such findings can also help provide recommendations for developing translator training courses. I realize the limitation that the online presence and job descriptions only scratch the surface level of the LSP's dynamics and performance, but two-layer investigation is still better than one-layer job description-based research patterns. And here are some of the references. And thank you. And I'm ready for questions.
All right. Floor is open for questions. You can unmute yourselves. There we go. Anybody out there?
Seems that everybody's sleeping.
Well, I'll ask a question then. I'm curious in terms of, and maybe I'm showing my ignorance here, but it seems to me that in the Arabic-speaking world, that there is huge differences between dialects to the point where they're almost completely different languages by country. So I imagine some part of the training model has to deal with how localization must be an extremely important part of how you do Arabic translation, I imagine. And also, I wonder, but how different are those cultures? I know the languages are different, but how you think that cultural issues are a big issue in those projects between different Arabic-speaking countries, or do you think that the culture is largely shared? It's just the language that varies a great deal.
Yes. Thank you for this question. So generally speaking, we share a wide margin of commonalities in our culture, which also is affected by the language, actually. And then when we speak about the written text, we all use the same standard Arabic language. So that wouldn't be such an issue, but you are right. We have a lot of dialect spoken ones. So if we're talking about interpreting, and also new forms of written text like social media, there's huge discrepancies, especially when it comes to localization, that will definitely create more opportunities for maybe having more competencies in mind when designing a curricula, for instance.
All right. Any more questions? I find it really strange that I can't really see all the faces, so I can't tell, but I'll guess that means no. So I'll go ahead and introduce our third speaker. Let me pull up her description. Thank you, Ali. And so next speaker is going to be Lamia Filali Munsef Lascano, and she is a first-year PhD student at the University of Basque Country in Spain. She graduated with excellence in translation and interpreting at the University of Basque Country, and has a master's degree from the Open University of Catalonia in contemporary culture. She has been working simultaneously as a Basque technician for 4 years and is a member of the EIZIE, the Association of Translators, Correctors, and Interpreters of the Basque Language, where she has started to work in representation of the Red Vertice or Red Vertis, and the network of professional associations of translation, interpreting, and correction present in Spain. And her paper is called Translators Agency and Mediation in Professional Translation in the Basque Country. So if you could share your screen, we can get going.
Yeah. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's big. All right.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Lamia Filali Munsef Lascano, as you said, and I'd like to thank these forum organizers for the opportunity I've given to talk about my study. The name I've given today's presentation is Translators Agency and Mediation in Professional Translation in the Basque Country. When I began the study, I wondered, what are some examples of how professional translators in the Basque Country actively intervene or mediate to ensure that intergroup communication is successful? To answer that question, I chose to study professional translators in the Basque Country, whether in Spanish or French territory. The territory called Basque Country is divided into 3 different administrative and political entities. 2 of them are in Spain and another one is in France. The social linguistic context and legal status of the languages present is also relevant to understanding how translation flows work. In all territories, there is one dominant and official language, either Spanish or French. Basque is co-official in some of the Spanish territories, similar to French in Canada, but not in France. And that means that linguistic policies are also different. In fact, there has been an immense work of revitalizing Basque, especially where it's co-official and since Franco's dictatorship ended more than 40 years ago. Since then, Basque translators have been more and more professionalized, and today they contribute to a great extent to the bilingualism of this territory on a daily basis. Of course, there are other languages present. For example, there are speaker communities from around 120 languages only in one of the provinces. And there is also another relevant factor when talking about the social linguistics of any territory, the use of each of the languages present. In general terms, when speaker communities don't use their language in all areas of life, like at work or on a trial, we can talk about minoritized language, and that still is the case of Basque. The theoretical framework I chose was sociology of translation, as I analyzed people, translators, and their actions. In order to do that, the methodology consisted of a qualitative study based on 9 interviews with translators from different fields, linguistic combinations, and modalities of translation. Most interviewees usually translate from Spanish, English, or French into Basque, but one of them usually translates from English to Spanish or vice versa, and 2 of them usually translate from Spanish into Arabic or vice versa. However, either some interviewees or their teams occasionally work with other languages, including Italian, German, Romanian, Russian, Portuguese, Urdu, Farsi, Polish, and others. The data presented show that translators can indeed be considered to exercise at least two types of mediation: negotiating the conditions of the Commission and choosing how to present information. First, most interviewees negotiate the conditions of the Commission to an extent. Just like an architect designs the ways in which a building is best designed, translators also tailor and decide the best options for texts to be successful. But to be able to do that properly, they first need enough time and resources. This usually means that they mediate between the commissioner and the social cultural groups translations are addressed to, because what they claim is that they want to be able to offer a text of sufficient quality, a text that suits the minimum deontological code of the profession, and that final users can fully understand and that makes them feel addressed to, as some interviewees claimed. They want the text to be useful for people, communicative, because they think that's the ethical thing expected from a translator. This suits PIM's ideas that translators' authority to decide on their texts lies on a historical process by which translation has been professionalized and become a visible job. For him, to the extent that translators have slowly transformed their anonymity into a professional identity, they have been able partly to develop professional ethics. But can it simply be assumed that all individual translators have become equally professional? Have they all gained sufficient authority to develop their own ethics? Not in the case of my interviewees, and the differences on the degree of the capacity to decide on the text are related to structural factors that generate power relationships between the people who participate in the process, from the moment a text is decided to be translated until its final version arrives to the final users. Pim says that translation itself has fundamental asymmetric principles. Authors and translators are by definition not equal. Text flows between senders and receivers are rarely balanced or reciprocal. The right to information is not automatically a universal blessing. I detected two main structural factors that can affect their capacity to negotiate and guarantee the quality of the translations. First, the economic stability of the individual interviewee. In general terms, public workers had a high level of stability and could thus negotiate more successfully, whereas company workers and freelancers had fewer to zero success or did not even try to, despite detecting quality gaps on their translations. However, the freelance Basque translator in French territory had also a high level of stability because of different reasons, one of them being the market. There are fewer translators that can translate into that dialectical variety, and so it's easier for him to negotiate successfully. Secondly, the other structural factor I detected was the administrative and political structures, which promote different linguistic policies and legal statuses to languages. All these relevant structural factors happen to connect with something else, the concept of linguistic privilege. Ingrid Piller explains that the resources allocated for each language reflect the power relations between speakers. Which final users matter enough? Which ones deserve the time and resources to take care of the quality of a final text? In Basque, even a television program had a whole section devoted for years to taking with humor the poor quality translations seen everywhere. In dominant languages, the interest in communicating the message of a translated text usually comes from the sender. However, the interest in communicating the message in minoritized languages doesn't always come from the sender, but from the final users, who also understand the source text because it's in the dominant language, but who want to get the information in their own language. This means that power relations between speakers are also another structural factor key to explain translators' negotiation strategies. This was the case of most Basque translators, but also of the translator who works at the intercultural area of the Basque government in Spain, a special translator area that is in the charge of texts addressed to immigrants. This translator reported, "I'd rather have more time to send back something more adequate. We really care for these aspects. Many times they don't understand us." He's talking about commissioners, who are colleagues from other departments of the Basque government. Or you're told, no, this has to be for after tomorrow. No, how long did it take you to do that job? More than a year. And the translation into 24 hours? Not possible. No, the translation needs at least 12 days. What? Yes. And can you explain me why? Of course, I take it, I adapt it. I can send it back to you if there is something I haven't understood, to know in which sense you're saying this, in which sense you're saying a lot of things, for people to fully understand it and make the most of it. This means that if it was possible for them, interviewees negotiated with commissioners the material resources needed to guarantee the final quality of the text. And if it was not possible to negotiate, they told me about the need of them, like enough time or retribution, contextual information required to understand the commission and translate it properly, technical resources like specialized dictionaries in their language, or other colleagues' help, either related to the language industry, like correctors, for example, or not, like marketing experts or a specific scientific expert regarding content. Interestingly enough, these negotiation strategies detected are clearly in contrast with the sworn translator into Spanish that I interviewed. In spite of being freelance, her economic stability was high, and she did not usually have to negotiate material resources. This also fits Pim's ideas, because sworn translation is the most professionalized sector in translation. The ethics are pre-established by an authority mechanism. As he says, in Spain, sworn translators are authorized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and have their certificates issued in the name of the king. The translators to Basque or other minoritized languages have these authority mechanisms. If they do, the legitimacy does not come from a state or a monarchy, but from a regional government. We could then argue that in contexts of unfavorable institutional protection of a language, translators exercise mediation and take greater responsibility for communication. If they do not ask for more resources to be allocated, supported by discourses on professional ethics, the final text risks not being of enough quality. In this sense, the mediation contributes to linguistic rights and to the right to access of information of the different sociocultural groups that translations are addressed to. But what does it mean to defend the quality of translated texts? The second type of mediation detected is about how to present information. Translators can choose certain words and not others for certain audiences to feel addressed to, even for them not to feel they're being excluded from the conversation. They can also suggest the commissioner to change the communication strategies from the original to the translation. And if they do so, it's thanks to the linguistic diversity present or potential in every language, which helps tailor texts to final users. Final users may be diverse in different senses. Because the difference between the cultural and the social is not clear for all scholars, I chose to call all these problematics situated realities that translators have to deal with and decide on. These situated realities can be familiar for certain groups or individuals and not for others. I drew on David Catan's model because it covers both dimensions and distributes them into different levels, depending on how apparent or questionable they are for people. The model thus divides culture into 3 layers that take the form of an iceberg and are located in society. I will briefly give one example from each layer that I discussed with my interviewees. Those examples show that interviewees actively decided they had to intervene if the power relations described before allowed them to do so, or at least suggest intervention for the quality of the text to be sufficient. I call these strategies discursive mediation because it is through choosing the best way to present information which creates discourse that they mediated. On the most visible level, situated realities are what we typically identify as cultural. These include culturalisms, which are widely studied in translation theory. But there is something interesting that Catan mentions here that some of my interviewees referred to, terms in dispute. One of the most frequent terms in dispute in my interviewees was territoriality, how to name the different territories where they live and refer to, regardless of the language they're working with. They have to decide on them because there are a lot of options to name them. For example, translating Euskadi as Basque Country or Spanish Basque Country or a regional administrative entity in Spain are whole different things for the different speakers. And depending on the one they choose in English, they will contribute to bring closer English speakers different meanings, different situated realities. In the semi-visible level, translators don't necessarily choose particular words or expressions, but communication strategies. Here are located things like register. We usually imagine standard speakers who will have learned at school or university the language required for each context. But reality is more complex. Each person and community have their particular access to language varieties. This is why varieties like plain English or simple English exist, but it's particularly relevant when we are talking about minoritized languages, whose standard and specialized varieties are sometimes non-existent, and other times they're being created right now and still not completely established. For example, Basque speakers in France are usually older and have not studied Basque formally because of French language policies. So they're not comfortable with written standard Basque, which only has 40 years, to the point where they sometimes don't understand it or choose to read the information in French instead. And the interviewee was making great efforts for his text to be less standard, especially the ones that address to older people. So he chooses a different communication style from the source French text, and instead of the Basque standard forms that are being normativized in Spanish territories, he's creating their own, closer to the dialectical forms his final users are more comfortable with. He's mediating. In the hidden level, the situated realities are less apparent, more collective and subtle, and we usually relate them to ideology. Here are located, as Catan says, values, beliefs, connotations, and identity. For example, translators sometimes have to deal with discourses about how to name sociocultural groups, and there has not always been the same path when talking about them in all languages. That's the case with people with functional diversity. The social acceptability of each possible term can be different, let's say, in Spanish and Basque, and the text is not saying the same thing if the word is translated as, let's say, retarded. The same was true with race categories, where in English, brown is used in birth certificates from Philippines, and the Spanish sworn translator saw herself trying to decide the best option to translate that word. Interviewees here had to mediate, considering the agents involved, as well as discourses and authority figures. This level is also important when talking about minoritized languages, because dominant ideologies sometimes condition translators' decisions and make alternative discourses about languages and about translation less valid for them. In the Basque interviewees, dominant discourses and authority figures were key to choose, and there were different options. So, what types of mediation do professional translators perform in the Basque country to ensure that intergroup communication is successful? I detected two types: negotiating the conditions of the commission to guarantee the quality of the final text, and choosing the best way to present information depending on the actors involved, ideologies, and authority figures. And all in all, just like anyone else, translators are social actors. The study shows that translators can play an important role in guaranteeing the linguistic rights and the access to information of the speakers of the languages into which they translate, especially when translated into minoritized languages, and especially in contexts of unfavorable institutional protection. They can particularly contribute to a successful intergroup communication. And when they are defending quality criteria, they're also defending difference that exists between the final users. And it does matter which option they use, because it is not communicatively the same for the final users. So taking care of how to present information is actively taking care of the diversity of cultural viewpoints, ideologies, speakers, and social cultural groups. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
There you go. Now you can unmute yourselves. All right. Anybody? I can ask you one to get things started. So I'm kind of curious that how many people are actually monolingual who just speak Basque in Basque country?
Right now, I don't think there are any. Maybe 50 years ago, there were some, but right now, I'm not sure. Maybe older people.
So the real motivation behind a lot of the translation, then, the scopus behind this is really about language revitalization and yes, linguistic rights, exactly, more than actually bridging an understanding gap.
Yeah, and communicative as well. Communicative. Well, yeah, linguistic rights, exactly.
Okay, yeah, no, I think it's an interesting situation. All right. Any more questions out there amongst these little screens? I don't see any. Okay, well, thank you guys for participating.
Thank you.
All right.